It is so wonderful to be back in our spiritual home, Air Studios. And this is a very appropriately titled library, Appassionata, because it is in fact a passion project by the grand wizard of sampling and my business partner and very dear friend, Paul Thomson. How are you doing, mate?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Very, very good. Something that I've really enjoyed about these last 15 years, mate, is when you get the bit between your teeth, you don't let go. Occasionally, you're known to thump your fist on tables. And this is something that you've just been so certain about. But it's a legato library. What's it all about, Paul?
Well, let me start by just playing you an example. Have a listen to this. This is the violin 1 section.
It's the thing that you can't do with samples. You can now.
So it is a legato library. It's not a does everything library. It's focused on this one job, and it does this job incredibly well. In fact, better than anything I have ever heard. And that job is doing soaring melody lines, full of kind of passion, movement. You can hear the players really kind of emoting, but it does that from the absolute top dynamic all the way down to the very softest whisper quiet PP. And those whisper quiet notes are still filled with this kind of feeling of life and passion and movement and meaning. And that's the thing that we've really focused in on here. As you say, it's recorded in air, individual violin 1s, 2s, violas, cellos and basses, all performed in the same way. We have developed a new way of recording this stuff. And this is kind of, it goes back to an experiment that we did back in 2007 on our very first session. We did this thing and it was called impulse notes. And I've been thinking about this ever since. The technique that we've developed now has taken about 2 years to develop and then recording the library. We call it impulse legato. And it's a different way of kind of focusing in on what is happening at the point at which the players change the notes, how they perform each individual note. I won't go too far into the detail.
Don't give away the nuclear codes.
No nuclear codes, but it is spectacularly successful. Let's have a quick listen to a clip of Blakis's demo.
That's an extraordinary demo. So who remind me who Blakis is, Paul?
So Blakis is Blake Robinson, confusingly, because we have our Blake Robinson who's worked with us and came up with the original Contact programming and still very heavily involved in our programming. He's a mad genius professor type. But this Blake Robinson, he's a composer in Australia. He's a fantastic composer. He's done, if you check out his website, he's done some work for Star Wars, trailer work and things like that. And, you know, using all the beautiful John Williams themes. And he's just very, very good at orchestration, at all the kind of geeky stuff, you know, that we all love. A great composer.
It's just incredible. The thing that for me, even with Andy's demos, that have kind of given it away is these soaring melodies. So it's very exciting for me as a composer to know that we're capable of doing that now.
As I say, this is not going to be perfect for every single violin line that you write. As we kind of develop in the techniques of sampling and the way that we record instruments and also the kind of use cases that we start to investigate, it's become really, really clear that you just need a nice wide set of tools. Like any good chef, you need a nice big bag of different kinds of knives and, you know, spatulas and whatever. You've got to pick the right thing for the right thing. But this is something that has not existed, in my mind, to this level of performance and dynamism so far.
It's just stunning. So take me through the process, because I've been messing around with folk musicians up here in Scotland during COVID. I was aware that you were beavering away on this kind of very secretive project.
Yes. So I kind of went into back into the old stuff, and I kind of looked at it and thought, right, how can we adapt this now with all the stuff that we've learned over the last 15 years, which is incredible that it's just doesn't seem to be that long. It seems to have flashed by. But the last 15 years of kind of iterative, Kaizen, as you describe it, that kind of iterative, little bits and pieces of improvements over the years. Knowing now what we know now, what could we have done then? And what can we do now to kind of take that idea and bring it to life now? We went in during lockdown, so we couldn't get into the control room. We had this amazing system rigged up with air. So Jake was in the control room recording. But there was myself and Luke Olney, who's my other kind of, fellow resident sample nerd, kind of probably up on a level with me, Andy Blaney, the kind of real tinkerers. I would say. We two nerds were dialed into air, just trying this experiment out, first of all, with just a couple of layers and just one section. When we got that stuff back, and I then did the first mix of it, and then Luke did some programming on it. And I remember getting a message from him, and he was so excited. He said, "Oh my goodness, you have to hear this." And we put it together, and it was startling how good it was. We just knew immediately this is going to work.
So, Paul, it's split into the various different sections, and I see that there are some different articulations. So do you want to take us through a quick overview of these articulations?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to load the violin twos up just so we're just playing something a bit different. Let's try and hear everything by the end of this kind of first look. So we have our legato. Just give you a quick reminder of that. I am going on to the other articulations, but I just wanted to say, you can hear that we've built a couple of different things into it. There's lots of clever stuff going on under the hood. Because there's 5 dynamics here, you don't have to move the mod wheel very much. It's really beautifully kind of smooth to get you from one dynamic to the next. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah.
There's a lot going on as you move through the dynamic range. You really get a huge amount happening in there. And to help with that, we've also got a new bit of tech up here, which is called dynamic smoothing. Now, I've got it set to agile, but there are 2 other settings, moderate and relaxed. It kind of makes the process of the movement of the mod wheel slightly more relaxed, I guess, as it says. But it's doing some other clever stuff as well. This is one of the things that has been really great about being able to start with this blank canvas of working in our own plugin and being able to say, right, what we need to achieve is this. How are we going to achieve that? And then coming up with lots of interesting different things that we can program into it, things that we wouldn't have been able to do
at code level.
Yeah, exactly, at code level. You've got a kind of simplified version of the legato there, but you've also got these sustains. Now, in many situations, you might say, well, the sustain is just if you want to play polyphonically instead of playing monophonically with the legato patch. And yes, that is the case, but this has some clever stuff in it as well. And I just want to play you some stuff with it. And I'll play just some 3-part. So basically you can hear, you've got these detailed and beautifully expressive long parts where you can hear the players really kind of going for it and creating this appassionata sound. And it is the sound that is the most difficult to record. We were literally on, every single performance, like, is that right? Is that right? Stopping every so often, going back, comparing, giving more notes to the players. And the players were really engaged in this, and they found it very, very interesting and kind of wanted to focus into reproducing the sound, like a little bit of a kind of chess puzzle, I think. And we took a lot of research that we looked at scores to find where these kind of things occur, how are they performed. We talked to the players about how they're performed. They told us specific things that they would do at specific moments that they wouldn't do and that's consequently, there's a kind of really expressive, almost kind of portamento, very highest level, which you get to, but it's a sul top string thing. And again, this is part of the theory that let's put something together that does what you want it to do without you having to program 100 key switches and trying to work out why it's not sounding like it does on the score that you're listening to. Let's just build it so that it performs in the same way that the players would perform, how they told us they would perform.
So I see that we're using the word hairpin, which is what we use in kind of media circles. It might not be obvious what that is to everyone and indeed how to use them.
Okay, so I'm going back to violin ones at this stage, just to vary it up. Now, hairpin traditionally, this is a crescendo diminuendo. So you get louder and then you go quieter. But a hairpin can mean either one of those or both of those. Now, we've performed this in a very specific way. It is designed to use with the mod wheel so that you can shape the end result to be exactly what you want, rather than having just one thing that just repeats every time you hit it. So let me demonstrate. On the shortest one, you've got, if I play a couple of the different layers. Now you can hear that when we play the top layer, we start with a hard attack. The reason for that is that if you want to do a very quick, like that kind of shape, a crescendo diminuendo, the way to do it is with the mod wheel. Like that, which sounds really, really brilliant.
Let me have a go. Oh, that is clever, Paul.
But it gives you the option to do either a fast crescendo, that kind of thing, or it gives you the option to do sforzando piano or SFP, however you want to kind of describe it. Start at the top with the mod wheel at the top, you get that lovely hard attack, and then you can pull it down to nothing.
Let me try that I'm going to try it on violas, one sec. So this is just a crescendo. And then SFZP, whatever it's called. Amazing. Yeah. So you've got different lengths as well.
And then different lengths. And again, you've got these, and here's the top one. And again, we can do our kind of shape. You can shape it to all kinds of different ways. There is a slight build in dynamic as you get towards the middle on each of these performances. But the key thing, in line with our Appassionata, is its intensity and appassionata-ness gets more as you get towards the middle and then dies away again towards the edges. And then we've got this longer one, which has a bow change in the middle, and this is incredibly useful. The softest and the loudest. And if we go through the layers again, you can hear that you can just shape that to be, exactly what you want. The final one here is this glancing attack. This is a slightly different and slightly unusual kind of thing. Let me demonstrate it first, and then I can explain. This is useful in the context of some of these phrases, but it's not a staccato. It's not a kind of traditional spiccato or staccato, because that's not the focus of this library. But this is a useful short that you might use for this kind of it's an intermediate note that can be useful for when you're doing a kind of long phrase, and then you want to go jump, jump, da-da-da-da-da, that kind of thing. But this blends incredibly well with the symphonic strings, with the chamber strings, obviously both recorded in air, both recorded with the same kind of mic setup, although there is some more detail here for this, which I'll talk about in a minute, for specifically to bring out elements of the Appassionata sound. The Olafers library as well.
The evolutions, yeah.
Locks in beautifully with all of those.
You made a decision about the band size, because I tend to use the chamber strings more than the symphonic strings, because whilst the symphonic strings are epic, I find the chamber strings more powerful. So what is the band size on this?
So the band size on this is 86664. So we've got 8 violin ones, 6 seconds, violas and cellos, and then 4 basses. The reason for that is that each section has the depth of sound that you need to get this Appassionata sound going. But it's small enough that you hear the intensity of each individual player.
So it's not just like a silky bath.
Exactly. But it locks in really brilliantly with both of those libraries. And the reason for that is actually there's a funny kind of perception thing that happens when you go from different section sizes. So one violin you can clearly hear is a soloist. When you have 2 violins, you clearly hear that there's something odd going on because the sound suddenly, has this kind of...
Not highly recommended, really, is it?
Not highly recommended. When you have 3, you get a nicer kind of ensemble sound, which has that kind of slight chorus, I guess you might call it, or whatever you want to call it. It has a feel that you now have a section. Now, we did a really interesting experiment years and years ago, me and Andy Blaney. We used a quick test that we'd done with 3 violin players playing some elements of a legato patch and just slapped it into symphonic-sized sections. And the curious thing is, you can't really tell that you've got only 3 players. Now, I'm not saying that it wouldn't become obvious, obviously, the more you kind of work with it. But as you expand the section size up, there comes a point about sort of, halfway through where you start to lose the focus over the individual player sounds and it becomes much more of a section sound. It's really surprising, and it depends a lot on the room that you're recording in. It's really surprising how quickly that happens. So being able to tell whether you've got 6 players or 8 players or 10 players is actually really quite tricky. So that gives us a lot of latitude to exploit this. And anybody who has combined different libraries together will know that while, a lot of people say, oh, it must be really hard to do that because surely they sound so different. They actually don't sound very different. It's the kind of texture and the feel of the sound. And that's the thing that you have to match. And that's the thing that you do in your performance while you're playing the library. So it works really beautifully with all of those.
I usually roll my eyes about this, Paul, but rumour has it that the different mic positions are really profound.
So let me show you. So we're on the violin ones. Now, we have mix 1, which is the mix that's... it was the first mix that... I should tell you about that, actually. In our experimentation, we had poor Jake putting up 5 sets of outriggers. I think 3 or 4 different sets of valve close mics. We had the ribbon close mics, which are in here as well.
And outriggers give the broadest sound, don't they? They say that they're in the same kind of plane as the tree, but they're just wider apart, aren't they?
A lot of engineers fold them into the tree, so it becomes just one unit. I mean, I don't mean narrowing the pan. I mean, they just become part of one thing. They're considered to be just part of the Decca tree sound. We keep them separate because we like to have the control over how much you put in. But I was really, really interested to know, specifically with this sound, what outriggers would help to reinforce the sound that I was trying to pull out of the performance, which was this Appassionata, the feeling that you could hear the individual players really kind of emoting and giving their all. It was an incredibly interesting experiment. And from that first session, I developed this mix, which Jake very kindly tweaked a little bit to just to even out any of the rough edges. But it's essentially that the result of that experiment of looking at different mics. And then Jake has gone away and put together 3 other mixes. So let's compare them. And switching to mix 2. So this is the widest mix. So this would be very, very similar to, in the symphonic and the chamber strings, the wide mix. You've got a slightly tighter mix, so you hear a little bit more of the instrument sound and a little bit less of the room here. You've got the most intimate mix. which has much less room. And if you want to tighten this up, we've also got this release control at its most extreme, pulling it right down. For fans of drier libraries, that really gives you a huge amount of control. And if I put that right back up to the top and go back to the broadest mix, we get this kind of sound. That really kind of wonderful, expansive bloom of sound at the end. So I'll pop that back to its default position. So we have the room and mids. Now, these are designed to go together, but I'll give you a quick listen to what each one sounds like. So that's the stereo room on its own. Let me pull that right down and put up the stereo mids. Now, the stereo mids are really, really useful. And this is something that Luke actually told me, that mixers like Sean Murphy use the stereo mids to pull out the sound of a section mid-performance when they want it to feature more. And you can hear this in John Williams' scores that he's recorded and mixed. But you're not changing the kind of the whole perspective of everything. But what it's doing is it's kind of featuring that sound to your ear, and then you pull it back down again and it drops away. And so I've made use of that in my demo. I've automated the stereo mids, and every time I want a section to really kind of swell and sing out, I've brought that out and then dropped it away again. It was a novel idea to me and one that I didn't know about, but there may be other engineers who do very, very similar thing. But so it's a really useful trick to use with the library. I'll show you in a second. So just checking out the stereo, so the room and mids together. So that's an incredibly useful sound. And then we have our usual kind of CTAO. So if I just, let me just get those all up a little bit to get them loaded. I'll show you the difference between the valve close mics. So that kind of lovely, bright and sparkly sound. And then if we put the close ribbon mics up, that's that warmer kind of more rounded sound. So that's incredibly useful. We've got the usual stuff with the tree, which is the kind of main component of your sound for any mix pretty much. Then we've got the ambient. And finally, those lovely wide outriggers. And if we put those together, just get a kind of rough balance. I'll put a little bit of close in there, a bit of ambient. And if I actually change the mix while I'm playing, you can hear what's going on. There's lots of kind of different kind of perception that you can create with this, lots of sound stages that you can create with the combinations of all of these mics.
Fantastic. Now, something I'm really excited about, just on a totally selfish level, is I'm working on this massive multi-episodic TV series at the moment. I had the huge honour of working with a big old orchestra at Air Studios just before Christmas. But over Christmas, I wrote a better theme. But I've already recorded the orchestra. So I'm chomping at the bit, not only to be able to do it with Appassionata, but also these microphones give me the Dolby Atmos requirements that are more commonplace these days.
With a multi-output instance, you can set up almost anything you can possibly imagine. You might have all of the mics open and then just adjust your balance to kind of position where you feel you are within the picture.
Amazing.
It's great for matching it to other sounds as well and to other libraries.
So not only am I doing this TV, which I can't wait to use this on, but also I've got to do my demo for the product page. Do you have any pointers of use?
There's a couple of things that I would say. We mentioned before briefly You don't need to move the mod wheel very much. You get a huge amount happening as you go through the layers. So you can spend ages just even down in the bottom third of the mod wheel and still have loads of expressive kind of sound. Let me load up the violas again. I can show you. As you have all of the sections going, and you've got all these different parts, it's very tempting to kind of go back to kind of, real up and downing extravagantly. Don't need to do that. It's really, really effective when you kind of focus it in on these areas and then just save that kind of real singing thing for when you really want the section to kind of cut through. So that's the first thing that I've found. The other thing to note is with the violin ones, twos, and cellos, you have that thing that I mentioned at the top, the kind of sul top note thing. So on the cellos, the top note is the A string. When you go from A up, anything that's over a perfect fifth in either direction, at the top of the mod wheel will trigger, when you play hard, this most expressive transition. In fact, that's something else I should tell you about the velocity control. So the only things that you have to worry about here when you're controlling it are the mod wheel and how hard you're hitting the keys. And what happens is at the lower level of the of the velocity range, so the transitions you're hearing there are just the normal fingered transitions. If you want to trigger a bow change, you play slightly harder. You can hear that change really nice and clearly. But if you're at the very top of the mod wheel, so you're on the most passionate FF layer and you go above that the top string, so you're from A upwards, and you play hard, you get that most expressive transition. So the difference being, that's the bow change one, and that's with this kind of characteristic thing that the players say, we would naturally do this if we're really kind of going for it. And it just sounds beautiful. Now, obviously, you don't want to use that everywhere because it starts to become a bit schlocky. But it's great to kind of pop it in every so often because it just does. It really kind of jacks up the emotion.
Thanks for those tips. Actually, I wasn't aware of those features, so that's going to really help me out. Now, something synth players like me get scared about is, we're padders. It's that thing of suddenly, oh my God, I've got to voice this. It's so utterly terrifying. I've kind of shunned that fear of late because it's actually incredibly simple. What I'd really like to do is I'd like to try writing as I usually do with like a flautando and then just very quickly voicing it off to hear what it would sound like with Appassionata.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. That'd be interesting, yeah.
I mean, something I'm just going to be aware of is 2 notes with the left hand, 3 notes with the right. So that'll make the voicing nice and easy, 5 in all. So I've got the chamber strings flautando, which is basically the sound I write with. Okay, so that's my nice pretty flautando. And the way I do it is I just duplicate it 4 times, and I'm just going to mute off the original, and then it's just a case of literally taking the top voice is the top set of notes. This is right, Paul, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the trick is you don't want to overlap. The law is fairly straightforward. It's just the first go above the seconds go above the violas, and the violas go above the cellos, and all the way down to the basses.
Yeah, that's absolutely the kind of first step. That's always the first step for a straightforward arrangement.
So what I've done is I've basically gone through and I've just first get the top note, seconds getting the next note down. I've done this thing called forced legato, which basically joins the notes up, and then I've dragged them all so they slightly overlap. And I haven't really paid attention to the velocity, so that's not going to be something that's going to feature here. But then one of the really important things about having the individual voices is you can then program the modulation wheel separately for each. So you get this real sense of, instead of it being a pad, of it being 5 individual sections. So I'm just going to quickly record the modulation pass for each voice. Seconds. And I'm going to keep these down a little bit at first until they move. Oh, so beautiful, Paul. Violas, again, until they move, I'm going to keep it moderate level. And the cellos. Is it cellos or celli? And actually, this is the first time, Paul, I'm hearing the basses. So this is exciting. I'm kind of doing this totally blind, but let's have a listen.
Lovely stuff.
To how that sounds. Sounds mental, Paul. So exciting. Brilliant. Oh, this is going to be a rabbit hole I'm going to lose myself in this weekend. So, I mean, you've had this idea for the last, it's been percolating for 15 years. I think the attention to detail is incredible. And there's all sorts of stuff in here that I imagine you detail in your more detailed walkthrough, which is available in the video description down below. But Paul, did it come out as you expected? Did it come short of your expectations, surpass them? What's your verdict?
It has surpassed my expectations. It has, I have to say. It's one thing hearing the individual parts playing and you just go, oh, wow, that is a really, really beautiful sound. I always try to think as I'm playing a part, I try to put myself in the shoes of the players. I try to think how they would emote that part musically. And when you start locking all this stuff together, what you get back is really, really extraordinary. I mean, it's very, very beautiful. In my templates, I've got an absurd template, which is about 800 or 900 tracks. This is the top. This is the first thing that you find in the violin 1 section, the first thing you find in the violin 2 section. It's just at the top of the list because it's the first thing that I'm going to reach for now when I'm playing. And the other stuff I will be using for specific use purposes. One obvious thing is, if I've got a fast run or something like that, you don't play a fast run Appassionata. Yeah. It's a different tool that you need for that. And so I will go back to the, to the symphonics, to the chambers, pick the right texture of that, and I will use that for that particular thing. But I think that this is my default sound now for the string section.
Yes, you've kind of filled me with dread because I'm working on this TV series and the template has already become, I would say, at least 60 cues, toolkit cues. So we're going to have to go through each of those and put these at the top of each section. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
This is what makes being in partnership with you so fun because you and I do have different approaches to sampling and I didn't really get the concept at all, but you were so bit between the teeth, as I mentioned. And, on behalf of the composing community, I thank you for it.
When you've kind of worked in the trenches as a composer, like we have over the years, you just you have an idea of a sound. And then if you're the kind of composer who likes to make sounds like we are, sometimes to a fault, you basically just kind of, like you say, it's the rabbit hole. You just keep going down it and you go, oh, that's not quite right. That's not quite right. So it's really important to keep kind of iterating on things and, to really try things out. And I do that when I'm recording my own stuff. If I'm recording, if I want to, record, I don't know, like I recorded my hi-hat for the media toolkit. I tried a couple of different mics out and then I was like, oh no, that's the sound. It's that one. And that's the thing that you get to. And it's like that kind of, it's always worth it. It's always worth putting the effort in because what you get out the other end is just so much better.
Yeah. Hear, Paul. Well, thanks very much for doing this keynote with me. And I'm sure you're going to be fascinated by this project. So click on the links down below to find the product page for Appassionata, which has Paul's very detailed walkthrough, some fantastic demos alongside all of the specifications you'd expect, etc., etc. Thanks as always for watching till the end, and see you very soon. Paul, hopefully in person soon.
Yes, fingers crossed.
Well, I'm very, very confident about 2022. I think it's going to be a wonderful year, and what a way to kick it off. See you very soon, mate.
See you soon.